Hi there, it's Micha. I already uploaded a video about the pilot episode of Loki, but since there are so many theories we can talk about, I'm sitting here right now with my sister Angie to do just that.
Hi guys.
Let's start by asking you, how did you like it and what would your rating be?
Okay, this is an easy one because I really like the character Loki, and I would give the episode a solid 8 because I think there must be room for improvement, obviously. And I think for a first episode it was really nicely done. So I'm happy to see what will come next, and yeah, I enjoyed watching it.
Okay, any specific highlights in this episode that you enjoyed the most?
I really liked the interaction of Loki with the
Owen Wilson's character?
Yeah, definitely. And the other interactions with the co-workers of the TVA. Mm-hmm. And especially the scene in that tiny little room where he had this really big stack of paper with everything he ever said, and constantly they were rushing in new paper slides.
That is ridiculous. Burp, 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 burp. Please sign that too.
Yeah, it was really funny. That one I really liked. Yeah.
Okay, so then let's dig a little bit deeper. So we have seen Loki seeing his whole life on a video screen, basically becoming the hero that we know from the MCU, and how he dies in the end. But we also know that the Loki variant that is present in that show was taken from the timeline 2012 in New York. So right after he was trying to kill everyone. Yeah. And even before he sees his mother dying, and with his whole emotional journey being still ahead of him.
Yeah.
But he has seen it on video, basically on the screen. So do we think when at the end of the episode he is sitting on the floor crying about his dead mother and realizing that his relationships would have improved with his brother and with his family, and that he would have been actually becoming a good guy, do we think that this is enough for that variant to catch up? So is he already on the right path to being a good guy? Or is that all show and he will trick us into liking him now and then being an asshole again along the way?
I do think his emotions are real, because in the scene before we see Loki finding a bunch of Infinity Stones stuffed in a drawer, and some employees use them as paperweights, and he's completely shocked and realizes and asks himself if the TVA is the real power. And then instead of wanting to flee the building, he goes back to the room and watches his life and his life ending. And I think, yeah, it seemed really, really intense and honest and real for me.
It might be very well that way because, as you say, he finds the Infinity Stones and he realizes that in that bureau everything is just a cheap copy. Yeah. So he might be very well realizing in that moment he is a variant. Yeah. He sees multiple copies of each Infinity Stone lying there. He's really hit by the impact of this bureau being the real deal. After then seeing how his life would have played out, I really think that he honestly caught up to the point that we know him emotionally. But of course, that is the big question for the viewer, to expect that he will betray Mobius, Owen Wilson's character, which he might even do a little bit in the beginning. Maybe he is doing it for show, maybe he's doing it for a certain reason. Yeah. I guess they will play with our feelings and emotions and expectations with that. Ultimately, I guess we will see him like we know him from the Avengers movie where he died, being the heroic kind of person. But again, we will see a little bit ups and downs, and tricks will be played on us with that expectation. But that, I assume, will be the outcome at the end of the show.
Yeah, I really think in the next episode, or maybe 2 or so, his character will be a little bit shocked still and act differently as we know Loki. It's possible that we see a twist in his behavior and a growth in a shorter time period. It will be very interesting, I think.
No. Again, I think there will be a lot of trickery on side of the screenwriters to play with that idea, but ultimately I guess we agree that he will be coming out the person that he was at the moment that he died, basically.
Yeah.
And basically is my favorite word, as you hear. Okay. One other thing, though, because when I watched the episode on Disney Plus of Legends, where they presented Loki back to us, we were reminded on how cruel he could be and what an asshole he actually is. One scene was not included, but I think I've seen that in another video where he actually cut out an eye from someone.
That was in the first episode of Loki, as Owen Wilson showed it to him.
Okay, that was a reminder, basically directly. Okay, then that makes sense that I saw it there. So, reminding us actually in the same episode that he is such a cruel character. How come we actually like him?
I like the character because he's so imperfect for a god. Yeah, he's so much like any human. And I think that's what really makes the character relatable. Yeah, nobody's perfect, and so is he.
So you buy into the sentence that he says as an explanation at the end when Mobius is asking him, "Are you cruel?" And he is saying, "I'm only trying to hide my weaknesses by being overly cruel because I'm also just a weak being." That's what you mean, and also what you hear out of that?
I also think he's so cruel because that's what expected of him. I don't know, I have this feeling that everybody thinks Loki is the bad guy and he has always a different agenda. And I think at some part of his life he just adapted.
So you mean as he is the god of trickery, the trickster god, that he was playing a lot of pranks and a lot of those came across as being cruel and mean, even without him meaning to? Yeah. And then everyone was treating him that way, and then he's buying into it himself. Okay.
I really do.
And that is also a human trait, as you said in the beginning. So that is something I guess everyone can relate to. Okay, another thing I was wondering about, and maybe that is not that much a discussion, but maybe just me trying to explain something and then see what you think about that.
Okay.
So we have the time twister, that device that lets people jump back a little bit in time. So basically when the prisoner tries to escape or tries to attack, then they just press the button and they jump back a few seconds in time. So what I've noticed is that they said the furniture is not impacted by that. That is why Loki in one scene is landing on his ass when he is jumped back to the place where he sat before. But doesn't that mean that the remote control he holds couldn't jump back with him, but needed to be staying in place? What I was thinking is it like that? Or is it just because he's touching it, like his clothes, that they are also jumping back with him? I mean, they didn't say what the rule is, but I guess it's a quite clever way that they brought it in like that, and they didn't explain it too much, so that it cannot be forced by default, because they haven't explained what the rule is. But what's your take on it?
I would think everything he touches or holds will zap back with him, exactly like his clothes. I really think it's possible to differentiate between furniture and not furniture. Because I know from work that it's technically possible by a LiDAR scan to differentiate between different objects like walls, furniture, people, trees, vegetation, buildings, and so on. And so I think it's really possible.
But if that is possible, wouldn't they then just say, if the prisoner is holding it, he cannot use it? Wouldn't that be a fail-safe they should build in?
Yeah, okay.
Again, I guess they will let us know the rules along the way, or not, because if they don't explain rules, they cannot misstep with them.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Okay, let's come to another point, and that is something I know that you have already thought a little bit more in depth. So, we know that there is an evil, or let's call it an eviler variant of Loki running around, which they haven't shown us for some reason.
Yeah.
So I know that you have a theory about that. Let us know what that is.
Yeah, I think at the end of the episode, Loki is told the variant is himself. But I think if it was really Tom Hiddleston playing this Loki, then we would have seen him standing in the field. For me, the shape of the person in the coat looked very female. And if you look closer at the episode, you see a file of Loki. And on this file, you see at the point gender that he is fluid. And Loki is a shapeshifter. He can take the form of Odin or of Cap. Why not a female person? When I saw Loki in the first Thor movie, I was very intrigued and I looked him up and I found out that there's also a character named Lady Loki, and it's possible that we see his female part. What I know so far about Lady Loki is that she's a really cruel version of Loki. And I really don't know exactly how it plays out in the comics, but I think there was something about using the form of a Lady Sith or something, but that's not so important here.
But do you know in the comics how it was explained anyway, that there are so many different kind of Lokis? Or is that just something that is the usual comic thing where you have different iterations in different comic series?
In the comics, he just shapeshifted into other persons.
So when he shapeshifted into Lady Loki, then he is a different character as well?
That was something different, and that is a fact that I'm not so sure of why he had to use a form or a body or something like that of Lady Sif. I think I have to read the comics to answer that question. And
maybe that's something that we can find out for the next video as an Easter egg or something.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting take there. So, Lady Loki and a gender fluid appearance.
What I also wanted to say is that it's possible that we will see in every episode a different variant of Loki. Because we saw in the instruction video of the TVA that if a Nexus event happens, there's not only created one different reality, but multiple ones.
Okay.
And so I think it's possible that there are different variants of Loki.
So we will see how that works out, because what I understand is that every event is just creating one additional timeline? Nexus event and a new timeline. But it can then from there branch out if it is not stopped.
Okay.
So potentially it can happen there. Maybe it's like you said then, but that raised one interesting idea in my head, that maybe when we remember seeing all the trailers that they already showed us with Loki, where they planned the idea that he is going rogue and that he is double-crossing Mobius' character with one-liners like, "What do you expect from me?" Something along those lines. So what I said before is that might be just he playing tricks, but also that, as you say, might be just different variants that might pop up and that are not that friendly yet and might be erased out of existence. So maybe not every Loki we see in the trailer is the same variant that we are now following in the show.
I really think so.
So what we can be pretty sure of, though, is that they will use the concept of the variants in this show to basically bring in different forms of Loki that might be in the comics, but not in that capacity. In the comics, there might be just different iterations from different comic lines. Yeah. And here they might just reuse them as different variants, which gives them a lot of room to play around. One thing I also need to look up is if those timekeepers are also something that are existing in the comics, and if all the other figures like Miss Minutes and everything else is something that is happening in the comics or not.
Mobius is. He's definitely in the comics. And the character, the Judge, also is a character from the comics. Okay,
so it's basically all canon in that regard, that this is not something that they create from scratch. That is all stuff that is already in the comic space. I also read, but that's just me remembering, maybe I'm remembering wrong, I've heard that the character of Mobius or some other character in the Bureau, so actually now I remember that they need to have been in the comics. So I'm also starting to get a little bit forgetful. I heard that they were all based on one employee of Marvel who was basically not the timekeeper, but he was the contingency keeper. So he was the guy who everything was shown to before they publish it. Every time they create a new comic version of something, he needed to sign off on it because he needed to make sure that this makes sense in the continuity and the realm of the whole series. Okay. And they created some of the agents of the Time Bureau based on that character, and they were also clones or something. They were all looking the same, but again, I might be completely off here. I need to read up on that stuff.
I think that was Mobius in the comics. It is so that Mobius' character is the baseline for all the employees of the TVA.
Which would have been very complicated in the show, of course. They couldn't do that, so I guess they went a different way here.
Yeah. And what I also wanted to say is that the character of the Judge is very multi-layered. I think there is some character of her, some version of her that's called Terminatrix or something like that. And I'm curious how this role will play out.
And I guess you're also caught up on the fact that this is very likely Mobius' girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then it was not just me. I think it was quite obvious, but sometimes one might misread stuff.
If it were really so, like in the comics, that everyone spawns off Mobius, that would be really weird. But in the series, it isn't so.
No. That reminds me, do you really think everyone is just being created by the Timekeepers, or are they just bred there and they just live in that world?
I really don't know. That's also a fact that I'm curious to see how it will play out.
We see this one employee who is...
who doesn't know what a fish is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that this could be a one-off, that he is not the rule and he is just a very reclusive kind of person.
Okay.
But it could be that everyone has no idea what's going on outside and they are just really living in that world and never leave it unless they are designated as a hunter. And are sent out as a team to basically reset timelines. But maybe one more quick thought about where the employees might come from. I could also imagine that they recruit some of their employees from a pool of variants that were ruled not guilty. Because otherwise I think it wouldn't even make sense to hold trials if at the end of it everyone would just be erased out of existence. Okay, one really big question that also is roaming around in my mind is the fact, what decides if it is a Nexus event or if it is something that should become canon? So we know that the Timekeepers have something that they think of. They have a certain sequence of events in mind that they have approved as the sacred timeline.
Yeah.
But we know when the Avengers go back in time that this is in line with what the Timekeepers approved. So basically that is canon, that is something that is not considered a Nexus event. But Loki picking up the Tesseract and jumping back in time and escaping from his imprisonment, this is considered a Nexus event. So what is the big difference? Do we have any theories about why one time travel event is fine and the others are not?
I really don't know if this idea I have is far-fetched or so, but I have this scene in my mind of Doctor Strange saying that of million or billion of possibilities, there's only one situation, only one possibility to win this war. Yeah. And I think that Loki has to die in this way and he has to be on this path. Okay. That path is part of this one solution, this one way it has to play out.
The sacred timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah. From what I understand though, and that is the thing that why I'm asking about that, what I'm understanding so far is that we have that sacred timeline, which is containing not just one universe, but the multiverse. So there is not a limit or a cap on new parallel universes being created. So every time, and that's what I understood from those explanations in Avengers, that every time we have a new timeline that is being created, a new universe, a parallel universe is created at that point. So that is something that's happening, and that is in line with what Doctor Strange says. He looked at all the different possibilities, and they are apparently all approved, or at least those that are being created are approved because the Time Variance Agency is not intervening. So that would mean that everything that happens and that 1 in a billion version that Doctor Strange predicted was predestined or was the sacred timeline, that was all fine. And then everything that was changed to reach that point with the time traveling stuff was also approved. So from that perspective, it wouldn't have mattered if there is another different timeline that might have a different ending or a drastical outcome because we are missing Loki from that point that you described. It would just be a different universe that is not in line with what we are watching when we see the MCU. So that is happening all the time anyway, that there are events that create those different timelines. But the question is, why is that one a scenario that they need to reset? Why is that one that might have created complete chaos? Because some of them also seem not that positive. If we remember back with WandaVision, a lot of stuff she is doing is also not perfect, and they are also bringing reality into danger and stuff. But everything she is doing seems to be also in line with what the Timekeepers think is the right thing to do. And there was no intervention. So it's hard to see what thing is really worth intervening and resetting and what is fine.
I think in the case of Wanda, from WandaVision, it's, she had effect on a limited amount of people and space, and her intentions were different from Loki's. I think at that point in 2012, he hadn't made his changes in character, and he would be someone who still wanted to rule the world and then the universe and so on. So I think it would really had a different impact. I really think that at that point Loki wouldn't have made the best choices, and everything would ended up in chaos. And so his development hadn't happened yet, and
I mean, at the end of the day, it's something they didn't explain yet, and it's interesting to see which way they go, because I think they need really to explain the differences of events and what can be considered a Nexus event and which is in line, and what's the big difference. Maybe it's just arbitrary, maybe it's just really what they think should happen, and then everything by definition that is not on that timeline is like that, and there is no big theory behind it. But maybe there is no such thing as variances at all. Maybe everything is happening as it should be. Maybe even this variant of Loki being created is needed and turns out to be the right thing to happen at the end of the day. And he was supposed not to be erased. Maybe he is the real deal and will be, like I said in the last video, be put back on the timeline after he died as a reward or something. Maybe that is what is supposed to happen, you know?
That would really be something I would be looking forward to, because I said so before, I really like the character Loki, and that was what I was thinking in the scene as we see Loki watching his own death. And in this moment I thought, maybe he's now capable of changing the outcome of this event, and he's able to trick himself again out of the situation as we've seen it before. And that would be really nice. But what I wanted to ask was, when we are speaking of Nexus events, did you notice that in WandaVision there was a spot about a Nexus tablet, a Nexus pill or something like that? I really don't know what
antidepressant, something like that, right?
Yeah.
I remember that, and I know that I read up on Nexus event to understand what that was in the realm of Marvel. And I had some theories there that I already forgot, and I know that those didn't came to fruition. Okay. But maybe it's a nice callback to that at the minimum, or maybe they were foreshadowing these things in Loki. Maybe we find out that some stuff that happened in WandaVision was actually something where they intervened and we didn't even see that. Okay. Because they already resetted the timeline or whatever. So it's a lot of stuff that might be brought in there that might end up being quite interesting, I guess. But for now, like I said in the last video, there was, at least on my end, not much stuff to really theorize about. But we have found a lot of stuff to talk about today to that point. So do you have anything you want to address in addition to what we talked about?
In addition, there was something I found interesting, and that was the appearances of the variants. The one scene in the church in the Middle Ages in France, we see a little boy who talks with Mobius. I think it's possible that it's Loki in a shape-shifted form. But okay, then the Kabui bubblegum makes no sense. But the boy also said that the person who did all the chaos in the church was a devil. And I think we have seen Loki with his helmet that has these devil shapes, these horns. And maybe the kid saw some variant with Loki's helmet.
But if we think of the thing that you said before, that this might be Lady Loki, do you think that Lady Loki might also appear with that helmet and those horns, or is that something that is more specific to our MCU version of Loki?
The female version of Loki.
Have you seen pictures of her, by the way?
I have seen pictures of the female version of Loki, and her outfit is leaned on Loki's male outfit.
Okay.
It's green and it has golden applications and so on. And so it's possible that she also wears some sort of horn helmet or something like that. Yeah, the person in the field also had a green cape on.
I think it looked something like greenish, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, so I think that's possible. And I tried to find out if this specific event at this time in this place has any meaning.
And does it?
The Friends one not, but the one in America in 1800 or so, that was a real event that happened. There really was finding of an oil field in this area. So this date is a real one. But I haven't found anything to the Friends scene.
It's also, I guess, quite interesting, and maybe that's like a closing word then, to see what's going on in the future with the show, because we have a variant that is going rogue, that is impossible to catch, and that likely creates so much chaos that, like they described in the pilot setup, that might create a new time war. Because all those timelines might be popping out of it. I guess because they cannot stop it, now they can branch out and create chaos there. So that is something that might be happening. But again, they need to do a lot of explanation anyway, because we know that timelines still branch out, even on a standard basis. But as long as they are the way the timekeepers predicted, it's fine. Maybe that ends up being the explanation, that they say everything that leads to chaos is the stuff that needs to be eradicated, and everything that doesn't end in chaos is okay. But then the question would be why Thanos clicking away everyone was not considered chaos and was allowed to happen. But, so maybe that is what phase 4 of the whole MCU will be explaining at the end.
Yeah, and I really want to know why the variant chooses what time, what place, for what reason. That's something I really would want to know, if there is a backstory.
I guess they must have a backstory if they attack specific events in time, and maybe there's a connection between those. So we will find out. But maybe it also is just to create chaos.
Okay.
Maybe that's Lady Loki's big setup. But
some variant of Loki's.
But one thing that I also wanted to address and almost forgot is, what do we think that variant of Loki, that dangerous Loki, is coming from? So is that something that might even be a variant from the future, or is that something from the very past? Is it something that was taken from a completely different timeline and universe that we don't have an idea of? Which of course is also a possibility. I mean, everything, like in the comics, everything can exist in parallel on different Earths, different dimensions. So maybe she is just plucked from somewhere, and that is the worst iteration of Loki ever, and they now have to fight her.
I really don't know. I really can't say.
Okay.
I think we will see.
We will see, for sure. Okay, so thanks for the talk. And we are curious about seeing the next episode and pretty much interested in seeing how that all plays out. So what are your ideas? What do you think? What might happen in the future of those episodes? If you have some ideas, let us know in the comments. That's it. As always, if you like this video, like it and feel free to also share it with your friends. And why not subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any future video. Make sure to also hit the notification bell so you won't miss any future uploads. So much for now, see you next time, and thanks for listening.
Bye!